Hey everybody, Aaron here. Welcome back to another anime review. This is the first Patreon-powered anime review that I'm doing, which means that if someone donated $10, in this case, the real Osaka goal, so thank you very much for that. He wanted me to watch Silver Fang, or as it's actually known in Japanese as Ginga Nagareboshi Gin. Now, this was an anime made by Toei Animation back in 1986. It was originally a manga series around 1980s, I believe 1983. And it follows a young dog named Gin. Now, what's interesting about this show is that it's one of those things that, depending on the time period, you'll watch this and you'll get different enjoyments out of it. Because, honestly, it's a show that it hasn't aged very well. And not in terms of, I don't want to say the animation. Like, well, let's talk first about the whole premise of the story. Then I'll get into, like, every little, nitty-gritty detail. But the whole premise is that we have this little tiny dog that's just been born into the world. His name is Gin. He's, or at least named Gin. And for the most part, the only thing that really makes him stand out is that he's got tiger stripes. And the thing is, though, is that, for some reason, a young boy named Daisuke gets really attached to Gin because he feels like Gin is, something special. He reminds him, I guess, of himself, that he's different from everyone else. And we see that apparently he's being bred to be a bear attack dog, because the thing is that in the mountains that they're at, there are these giant bears. I mean, they're like even bigger than grizzly bears, and they're deadly. And the thing is that they need these attack dogs, because without them, even with guns, with other forms of weapons, these bears don't go down very easy. So, we see Gin starting to kind of come of age. He's trained by the grandfather, who is very tough on him, obviously. He throws him around. This is a shonen series. In many ways, it has that shonen element to where characters, kind of go through a lot to become stronger, and then even when they lose, they get stronger, and etc. But, as the story progresses, Gin leaves the pack, or leaves his family, ends up on this giant, grandiose adventure that has him teaming up with other dogs. He meets, like, Ben, for example, who's probably one of my favorite dogs out of the whole series, just because he's, like, the tough guy. He meets Cross, who's Ben's, like, I want to say mate. He meets various other characters. He even meets ninja dogs. Yes, I said that right, by the way. Ninja dogs. Dogs that have ninja powers. This is where I want to say that the first half of Silver Fang, as it's known, starts off in a way that's actually pretty interesting. For an anime back in the 80s, your mileage is going to vary, because if you don't enjoy classics, it's definitely not going to be a show for you, no matter what. It's just one of those things that, if you hate classic anime, it's hard to watch. Luckily, I was born on a lot of classic anime, so I could watch between the newer stuff and the older stuff without too much of an issue. But the thing is that when the first half of the show starts, it's actually pretty interesting. It has some cool concepts of you seeing Gin go through all this stuff. You have Daisuke, you have all these characters that are being introduced, but you feel for Gin, because he's like, oh, he's a little tiny dog, and he has to go up against bears. He's got to be trained in a way that makes him stronger than everyone else. You feel really bad for this dog. The other half, which is the remainder half of the series, is where things start getting very, let's just say, overly wacky. Even for its time period, it's still kind of crazy and out there. It starts going into this kind of almost supernatural / too overly shonen type genre. And what I mean by that is that when the series first starts, or when the show first starts, Gin and the rest of the dogs don't talk. When they're by themselves, because after the humans kind of become like null and void in the series, because there is a part where the humans basically don't exist in the show for like 90% of the show, after like near the halfway point. Gin and the rest of the dogs start having voices. It's not like they're really literally talking out loud per se. It's just that this is how they're communicating with one another, and it comes off as obviously English, or, well, in this case Japanese, so this way people can go and, oh, okay, I understand what they're saying. But it's ridiculous. Like, the stuff that they start doing, the way they fight, the way that they make these packs and stuff. Listen, I'm not saying I'm a dog expert, but I know for a fact that dogs don't gather in this sense and just have giant amalgams of dogs, and then all of a sudden are to fight each other in the epic duels, and then use ninja tactics. Like, there's an episode literally where the ninja dogs use caltrops, which are those little kind of like spiky things that they throw on the ground. They put those on the ground so the dogs fall on them, and then they have pitfalls. I'm like, what the hell? They do spinning attacks. Like, I mean, they literally spin and attack people. What? It's it's ridiculous. A lot of the show is ridiculous, and it gets worse near the end where, let's just say, Gin himself does like a final attack on one of the main enemies of the series, which is a giant bear. I won't explain like any more details than that because obviously I don't want to spoil it, but he does an attack on him that I almost wanted to stop watching, even though it was at the end of the show. I actually wanted to stop watching when I saw that. It was so stupid. So story wise, definitely is going to be one of those things that you're not going to really think is going to be that great. It starts off strong, it ends on a weaker note because it tries too hard to be shonen. And don't get me wrong, I get what they're trying to go for. The 80s had some very crazy and out there anime, but this is a little bit much. I've seen a lot of stuff from the 80s that you can't compare this to. It's I've heard people talk about it, say it's like Berserk. I've heard people talk about it like it's Claymore, which actually might be someone I know that said that. That's what I'm thinking off the top of my head. It's not. Don't go into it with that mindset. This is an anime that, I want to say, if you wanted an outrageous, almost supernatural type show about dogs, maybe watch this, maybe, but otherwise no. It's not going to be something you enjoy. If you're trying to get into classic anime, stay away from this. But if you want to see more anime, obviously, or if you want to see anime about dogs that fight each other and fight giant bears, and like 20 of them can't take down a giant bear, even though they're like all assaulting them from every angle, and then someone does a spin attack on one of them and kills it. It's graphically though, I'll tell you right now, animation and all that, it looks good. It does. I'll tell you right now, Silver Fang, even though it's an old show, could be passable for even something from the 90s. It's got some nice art. I particularly love some of the backdrops. They're really well detailed. When it comes to certain characters, like when they get injuries and stuff like that, and it stays on them, I give a lot of credit because people don't remember a lot of the things from the older days. When someone got an injury in an anime, it typically would switch sides, or would be like they would forget where to put it exactly. For the most part, you can kind of tell they put a lot of detail in these characters. These dogs have some really cool details, so I'll give it to that. That's definitely a solid note. Music, also a very solid note. I enjoyed the hell out of the soundtrack for Silver Fang. It was really good. Opening was awesome, especially if you like older stuff. It's really cool. Ending song's a little too much for me, but I it's not a big deal. And I did like though that there's a lot of like, I want to say, some good solid soundtracks moments in the later episodes. I think for me the best soundtrack of this whole thing was near the end, but other than that, it was very, very strong. So I really think that was good. Voice acting, obviously too. Even though these dogs can talk and that's ridiculous in its own right, all the voice acting was really good for a Japanese anime. I have no problem with any of the Japanese actors. Some of them I do actually remember from some old classics, which is kind of cool. I think one of them was actually one of the voices for one of the characters in I don't want to say Gigantor. Was it Voltron maybe? I could be wrong about that, but I feel like I've heard his voice from an older show. It could be Voltron or Gigantor, but it was kind of cool to hear his voice, and I was like, oh, I've heard you before in something, and I'm gonna definitely look it up after this. I'll probably talk about to someone else that I know, but Silver Fang. I'm gonna do this, folks, because it's something that I always consider when I watch older shows. I always give 2 reviews to them. I know people go, oh, well, how can you give something 2 scores? I give it the score of how it would have done back then, and I give it the score of how it would do now. So let's first rate Silver Fang if it was coming out this year, or if you watched it in this year, obviously. If I had to rate it between an 8th and F this year, the first review, I will say probably a C- at best. C-. Now, if you watch this back in the 80s, I'll be honest with you, folks, it's not much better. I don't think anyone in the 80s would have been like, oh my god, this is such a great show. I think they would have been turned off by the weirdness of it. I don't think, the show has a second season, obviously, that came out in 2009, which means that the show, clearly they wanted to try to bring back. The manga, I guess, wasn't completed near the time that this anime was completed, because it's a 21 episode show. If you were to rate this from the 80s, excuse me, an 8th F, I would give it a solid C+. I don't think it's going to be that much more better. I don't think anyone would have really cared for this beyond anything else. I mean, in particular, when a show takes that long to kind of get a second season, it's not just because of budget constraints or anything like that. It's usually because time has been not too kind to it, and either they took a long time to even come close to finishing it, or for the most part, they just wanted to see if people would actually care about it in the modern day. I'll tell you guys, I watched a little bit of the newer season. I'm not watching it at all. I have no desire to be honest with you. It's a new story. I was watching some like tidbits of episode fights and stuff like that, and it gets even more ridiculous. It looks good though. I'll tell you that right now. It looks like leaps and bounds better than the original, but I'm not gonna watch it. You know, unless someone pays me to watch it, then that's different. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed my first Patreon review. As always, if you want your own Patreon review, definitely go to my Patreon. Hit the $10 one. I will watch any show as long as it's under 50 episodes. Usually it takes me about a month because I usually want to wait till the day that, you know, you have to actually pay it. This way I don't have people just going like, you know, I review something and then they take away their payment right away. I'm not doing that. That'd be so stupid. But yeah, I usually do it by the end of the month, so around, you know, like the 27th, 28th, etc. I also will review any show as long as it's not yaoi, yuri, hentai. I don't watch any of that stuff. Like I said, 50 plus episodes is too much, so if it's under 50, fine. It could be 51. I'll still do it, but other than that, no. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. I hope you enjoy this. God bless you all. I will talk to you in the next review. Bye-bye, everyone.